Good morning. Freilach. With the help of Hashem, we are learning PESACHIM Daf Nun Gimel. We're going to continue to learn more regarding biur, deadlines. The Gemara is also going to share with us natural hallmarks of various locations, all leading up to know that the natural hallmark of a chassid is simcha. We're going to continue in the Mishnah to learn more about the principles of the principle that we're learning, which is that one should comply with one's local custom, including, we're going to learn minhagim, and then we're going to have a shita in the Mishnah that says that it's prohibited, asur loy lo adam sheyoymar, that it's prohibited for a person to say, basar zela pesachu. This meat is for Pesach, even if he's making that statement once the meat is already slaughtered, and even if it's already cooked, because there is a semblance of someone being magdish kachim, which is something obviously that one may not do now when we don't yet have a Beis HaMikdash. And that's going to lead us into a machlokes tanoim, when a person makes a statement that has it in two parts, and one appears to contradict the other, whether we say tvois lashon rishon, or whether we say af bigmar dvarav adam nispas, that a declaration from a person always has to be viewed as a unified declaration, and if one part appears to contradict the other, then we reject everything the person said. We're going to have in the Gemara and Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis a moedike insight as to why did Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah go on Mesiras Nefesh, and as we will learn, especially Shitas Tosfos, that the statue that Nebuchadnezzar made, asking everyone to bow down to, was not an avodah zarah. For avodah zarah, you have to give up your life. That's one of the three big sins. But it was time he was asking people to be machabed him, and yet they went on Mesiras Nefesh. A miracle happened to them, and as we will see, that they made a kal v'chomer from the tzfardim that we have in the second Makkah. We're going to have another Mishnah on Daf Nun Gimel that's speaking about the minig, whether one should light or whether one should not light candles in the night going into Yom Kippur. And we're going to start the sugya of ein mevarchem al ha'oid ela b'motzei Shabbos. Whether after Shabbos is over, then for sure, part of the Havdalah now is that we light fire, as we learned in Masech the Brachas, and we make the bracha boirei ma'oirei ha'esh. So the question is whether this is done only Matzah Shabbos or whether this is also done on Motzei Yom HaKippurim. There's going to be, as we will see, two versions what Rabbi Yochanan said. And God willing, this sugya will already go into Daf Nun Daled, and we will see at the end that there is a difference between the kneders that we light for Havdalah Motzei Shabbos, that we could light, that we do light Motzei Shabbos, versus Motzei Yom Kippur, that the bracha should only be made on what we call a ner sheshavas, as we will explain that more, God willing, on Daf Nun Daled. Chavra, let us start on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. We left off 7 lines down from the top of the Amud by the Tanu Rabbanan. Again, we're learning about the general rule that when a person gathered produce that grew on Shemitah, not like the owner, but like anyone, I can gather from my field, from your field, a limited amount. And indeed, I'm allowed to eat it, but as long as that type, that species that I gathered is still found, it's not yet depleted out there in the fields. If the chayes can still find it in the field, I'm allowed to eat it. I'm allowed to serve it to my behemoth. The moment it's not found anymore, then I have an obligation of doing biur, peiros, shvi'is. Rambam means taichas biur. I have to push it, destroy it. I have to burn it. Tosfos and other Rishonim say I have to take it outside my domain. I have to declare that it's hefker, and then everyone, myself included, is allowed to take it again. So says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, we learned in Abraisa that oichlin ba'anav, and if you have grapes on the Shemitah year, you are allowed to eat it at sheyichlu daliyoy shel oichel. That if in the city of Oichel, in the region of Oichel, which is where the most of the grapes grew, if you still have grapes that's on their daliyoys, in other words, we built one thing unique about grapes, which makes it different than all other trees, is that you can't just plant it properly and have it grow. The vine, it's not like a little tree that needs a little bit of support. You have to push it, build dolios to keep up the vines. If you're not going to build supports to the vines of grapes, nothing will come from them. And by the way, that's one of the reasons that by a wedding, as we learned just a couple of days ago, we say in de hagefen be in de hagefen, because parents of Hassan and Kala should understand that without support for Hassan and Kala, and this also goes to the larger community, it's almost impossible. You need to have a support system. But coming back over here, as long as you have in the area of oichel grapes, then, like we said, which is in your region, we're speaking about people that live in that region, shalosh harotzos, as we learned yesterday, then you can eat. However, don't think that if you go to the oichel area and you don't find any grapes, it means for sure that you have to do beer. Says the Braisa that if you happen to know that in this season in someone else's field in another region in your land, there are still some grapes, so then oichlin aleim, then you can still keep it in your house on that account. In other words, the Braisa is not saying that oichel is the only location you have to look for. What the Braisa is saying is he's just giving you indicators that in that region, this is normally the area where this product lasts the longest. Likewise, oichlin bezeisim, you can eat zeisim if you live in Yehuda, until if the last zayis tree in Tekoya has no longer zeisim, now it's color, now it's depleted. Rabbi Eliezer, no, that Tekoya is not the general place to look to, even though Tekoya was saturated, was blessed with a lot of olives and olive trees, but Rabbi Eliezer, no, go to the area called Gush Chalav. And furthermore, what's pshat depleted? Depleted means not if you would go and you would not be able to harvest any more olives from the trees out there. Because you and I, Lavdafka, we understand how to really scavenge for olives. Achiyichla means that if an ani, God forbid, he knows how to find olives on trees because he's hungry. If he is unable to find olives, not on the outer branches, not in the closer, in the center branches, what's that he can't find? That he can't even gather the amount of a roiva. Another important, not that there's one olive left. He can't gather from that area, whether it is Tekoya, whether it is Gush Chalav, a roiva, that means that it's depleted. And now, whoever lives in that Eretz, in Eretz Yehuda, they have to do biur perishmis. Weiter, oichlin bigregeres, you can continue to eat your dried figs, achiyichla page beisine, until the figs of Beis Hine. Now, Beis Hine had a unique, actually, their fig trees were inferior. And whatever grew on their trees, it's called stunted figs. It never fully matured. But still, if you have those figs on the trees, you can have your dried figs. Says the Gemara, hold on, that doesn't work. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, this is all in the Braisa, he argues with the Tanakama. Are you telling me that these stunted figs are considered pedas? That could be used to determine that if you have these on the field, you can still keep them in your house. Moida says the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. When it comes to the obligation of tithing, there we do consider these stunted figs as pedas, which have to be tithed, as we learned that page beisine. Likewise, va'ahine de toiviyanan, even good, proper, standard, developed figs, both of them are chayavim b'maiser. But that's a unique chumrah that we have regarding maiser. But to use it as a leniency, to say that since these types of stunted figs still are out there, you can still keep the figs in your home, your dried figs. Rabbi Yehuda says that we don't do. For that, you have to have proper figs growing out there. Weiter. You can eat your dates. Rashbag says that oichlin, we had this yesterday, oichlin al shel bein hakipin, bein oichlin al shel bein hashitzin, that if there are out there in the fields, palm date trees, even if the dates from those trees fell off the tree, but it got caught in the branches, I don't care that it's not connected to the trees, you can still eat in your house. But if dates fell off the tree and they fell down to the thorn-like projections that grow from the base of the palm tree, so you have it in the tree, it's not connected to the tree, and Hirashbag holds and animals will have a hard time taking it because they don't go into the thorn-like area, so it's already considered koleh. Unlike the Tanakama that says, no, if it's out there, it's out there. Says the Gemara V'Nemini, you have a contradiction. It says in a Braisa, Oichlin ba novim. We're not giving locations. We're giving a time until Pesach. Because until Pesach, we can presume that there's going to be grapes out there. Likewise, V'zeisim, you can eat zeisim in the Shemitah year, Ad Hatzeres. You can have Groigeres until Chanukah. You can have dates until Purim. And on this last Chanukah and Purim, that when he learned this Braisa, he felt that this Braisa is not authoritative and something has to be amended and has to be switched. This is the last narrow line. The last two cases, which means that you can eat Groigeres, dried figs. Now, dried figs means until when there's figs in the field, that you can eat until Purim. Tamarim, you can only eat tamarim until Chanukah. He felt that in Eretz Yisrael, Chanukah time, out there on the trees, there's no more tamarim. So here the problem is, you told me that you can eat it until it's depleted in soyar, and here we're saying until Chanukah. So which one is it? So the Gemara says that's not a contradiction. Like we mentioned, more or less it's the same time. In other words, either if you know Tzoyer, if you're near Tzoyer, you want to check out Tzoyer, go there, Gesundheit hate. If you're not near Tzoyer, the Tanach is telling you that you should presume that around Chanukah time, there won't be any more dates left on the trees. The Iboy is saying, like we learned in the beginning of today's Braisa, that Hakatani Behedi, we learned in the beginning, that all of these shiurim only means when you presume there's nothing left. But if you know Im Yesh Mu'ucharos Mehen, then Oichlin Aleim. So like this, you have to presume in Eretz Yisrael, if you live in Yehuda, that when it comes to Chanukah, according to Rabbi Yechanan's version, that's it. There's no more dates. But if you want to go to Tzoyer and you want to check out the palm trees, and if you happen to find that there are still dates on the trees, then on their account, you can eat more. So what we ended up learning, the Torah has everything in it. Hafachba v'hafachba. So now we're going to go a little bit off Shemitah. Now we learned in Eretz Yisrael which locations have this product or that product. So then continuing on that line, says the Gemara Tanya, second white line, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Simin Laharim. Simin means here a hallmark. How do you know that this is a mountainous area? Milin is when you find over there gallnut trees. Gallnuts, those trees grow properly on mountains. Simin la'amakim, the hallmark of the valleys, this is all in Eretz Yisrael, which is what counts, is the column is date palms. Simin l'nechalim, what's the hallmark of rivers or of streams? Kanim, reeds. Simin la'shvela, the hallmark of plain lands is shikima. Shikima, guys, even in English, lahavdil, it's very similar to Lashon HaKodesh. You see, sikimor, the same letters. Now says the Braisa, says Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that if Afa Pisha in Ayel Davar Zeichel Davar, and what's the Zeicher? Shenemar, as it says, that the king made silver in Yerushalayim be so plentiful that it was as found as Avanim, and the Esha Arazim Nasan, and he gave in Yerushalayim for the building of the Beis Hamikdash so many cedar trees as abundant as we have kashikmin, like we have sycamore trees that are found bashfela, which is loroiv. So here's you have, at least when it comes to the sycamore trees, which by the way is a very expensive tree, that they normally grow properly, grow better in the plain lands. And when you see a lot of sycamore trees, this is, now you are in a plain land. Or if you want to know the hallmark of a plain land, look for sycamore trees, and the Gemara is going to give nafkaminas. So simin loharim is, like we said, the hallmark is gallnut trees. Likewise, simin la'amakim is that there in the amakim you're going to find palm trees. Lamai nafkamina, the Gemara explains the nafkamina. Nafkamina lebikurim, as we learned in the Mishnah, that what a Mishnah in Bikurim, that not only do we limit the Bikurim to the Shiva Saminim, to the 7 species that Eretz Yisrael has extraordinarily, that the product in Eretz Yisrael is way superior to all the other lands, but it's not that if you have any of the Shiva Saminim, you bring it. No, you have to bring it from the better, from the quality A of these Shiva Saminim. And therefore, one. Number 2, one of the Shiva Saminim is that Dvash. Dvash is date honey. You have to bring dates. But what happens if you have a palm tree that grows in the mountains? Not in the valleys. the quality of the Preda won't be that good. It's when the Bryce is telling you that the siman to the valley is the column, it's to tell you that if you have palm trees, the column that grow in the harim, they're not going to be so good. And therefore, their fruit should not be offered as bikurim. Likewise, peiros don't bring from amakim. Crops are inferior if they grow on the amakim. Very good. But what is good in the amakim? You know what's good in the amakim? The column. That's exactly the reason why we gave a siman. Another nafkamina, when we learned in the Braisa that the hallmark of streams is that near streams you're going to find reeds. Siman al cholim kanim. What's the nafkamina? Pashit. At the end of Shoiftim, when a person, God forbid, is found murdered, and if and when we don't know who murdered him or her, so then we have to do the measuring to the closest city. And then the people of that city have to bring an egla rufa, and the egla rufa has to be decapitated near by a nachal esan machlikas rishonim, what that means. But here our Gemara is saying nachal esan means near a raging stream, near a strong stream. What happens if there's a stream, but there's no reeds growing over there? Don't do the egla, don't decapitate, because the siman of a nachal is kanim. What about siman l'shfela? That the hallmark of plain lands is that there you have sycamore. L'may nafkamina, the Gemara says here, l'mekach u'memker, which means if I sold you a shfela, now if I sell you a piece of property and I tell you that I have sycamore trees and there are none, that's called a mekach tos. But what happens if I'm selling you shfela? I'm selling you a land in a plain land area, and I didn't specify whether it has sycamore trees or not. So the fact that the Braisa says siman la shfela sycamore means that if you, the buyer, if you bought it and you don't have these beautiful, expensive trees, you can go out of the sale. You can say mekach tos. I, the seller, never promised you that there's going to be sycamore trees. No, siman la shfela. I told you I'm selling you property in an area known as Shfela, in plainlands. Oh, there's got to be sycamore trees. So now the Gemara says, Hashta the asas la'achet. Now that you gave me the nafkamina for all of these simanim, or for the siman of shikama, that lemekach u'memkar, so I don't have to explain that the other simanim is chayes for bikurim, or for nachal esad. The nafkamina, lemekach u'memkar, is gavaldik for all of these simanim. In other words, any time that I sell you a property without specifying whether it has that product on it or not, but the property is on the mountains, let's say, so it has to come with golnut trees. And if it doesn't come with milan, then the buyer can back out. And the hayra from all the sugi is that a siman of chasidim has to be simcha. That's the hallmark. And if not, then you made a bad deal. Then that's lemekach u'memkar. In other words, we are obligated to make sure, especially that we are mechuna b'shem chasidim, right, to bring about always in our homes, be'ikid, and in every place else, a level of simcha that is befitting for chasidim. Okay, weiter chevra, like we mentioned in the beginning of this Perek, even though Makim Shonahagu began with the minig, v'negeah to Pesach, working out of Pesach until Chatzos or not, we're going to learn about moide dikim minhagim. We're going to go me'inyan le'inyan le'inyan. Here is the series, the Perek of minhagim. Says the Mishnah, in a place where there's a minig that you can sell small animals, small livestock, my friend, is sheep and goats. Large stock, behema gasa is cows and donkeys. And when it comes to selling large behema gasa chaver, we learned this in Masechta Shabbos. There is an isser that we have to sell it to goyim, because if we'll sell it to them, we might rent it to them, or we might loan it to them. And renting and loaning my large animal that is primarily used to work the fields is asur midai raisa, because when the Torah obligated me to rest on Shabbos, we have an aseres adibros that the obligation is not only for me to rest, but it is for my animals to rest. Shvisas kelim is something else, but shvisas behemtoi, we're mitzuval shvisas behemt. And therefore, if it belongs to me and I lend it to the goy and he works with this on Shabbos, he plows a field, I am, God forbid, being machal Shabbos. So to prevent me lending it to a goy, that l'kul alma, there's no minik. The Chazal made an isser, I may not even sell to them those animals. By the way, we learned when it comes to selling animals that there's another fear, that if I were to sell my animal to a goy right before Shkia, and I still want to show my client how good my animal is. So I'm going to give him a verbal command to do something. I might give him that verbal command already when it's Shabbos, and if my animal who is obeying my command is doing a malacha, that's called mechamer. Anyways, you cannot sell your animal. Question is, can you sell small animals, sheep and goats? They don't work the fields. That is totally b'minig. So you have to follow the local custom. However, says the Mishnah, you may never sell. That's not a minig. You're not allowed to sell behema gasa. Now, behema gasa, like we mentioned, goes to cows, oxen. It goes to donkeys. But what about if they're young? They are not going to work the field yet. That is included. That's not a minig. The isur of the chachamim not to sell to goyim behema gasa includes even agolim, even young cows, calves, even young donkeys called sayachim. Whether they are shleiman, and even if they are shavurim, even if a bone broke. So this animal will not be working. Like plug. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, Taka, there's an isur midrabanan to sell behema gasa to goyim, but that only goes to shleiman, but not to shavurim. Because if the animal has a broken bone and the guy who's going to buy it will not be working with it, you buy a broken animal for its meat. He's going to slaughter it. He's going to kill it right away. So it's not shayach for you to be choishes that if you're going to sell it, you might lend it. It's too far away. He buys this for eating. Then Beseda has another exception to this Takanas Chachamim, and that is that you are allowed to sell to a guy your horse, because horses were not used for working the fields, which, like we mentioned, if the animal belongs to me, even if I loaned it, even if I rented it to the guy, I'm going to be violating Shabbos. Horses are used to be ridden upon, right? People ride on a horse. And by the way, we are not allowed to ride on a horse on Shabbos, but that's only midrabanan. That's only midrabanan. You're not going to make a double midrabanan. Imagine you can't sell a horse because you might rent a, and if you rent a horse and the guy rides on it, that's not an isur daraisa. Even that is not an isur daraisa. Okay, the next group of benagim that the Mishnah speaks about, in the place where people are okay with us, not in the Beis Hamikdash, not in the context of a Korban Pesach. Can we eat roasted meat on Pesach? Roasted meat, we just had this above. What is roasting meat? Roasting meat means meat that was prepared either on fire or even in a pot, but no water was added. That means it cooked in its own melted fats. That's called roasted. Now, can you do it? So if the minig is to eat tzili, oichlin. But makim shenahago shaloi le'echol, he already ate oichlin. And why did they have such a minig? So as Rashi writes, a couple of lines at the end of the Mishnah, 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid, the mechazeh ka'oichel Pesach b'chutz, because it looks so much like the Korban Pesach, it looks like you're eating, God forbid, Korban Pesach outside its boundaries. Korban Pesach is Kachei Kalim outside Yerushalayim. Okay, that's very important. I know many people today, Americans, they have what do they call that? Meat roast, whatever it's called.
Hot roast.
Hot roast. Got to be careful. Okay.
Rabbi, so the whole reason we don't sell a behema gasa is because mechamer.
Very good. Two reasons. Number one is if you would sell it right before Shkia, then you might, at the end of the sale, you'll still show off how your animal follows your command. And if he does something like there's a peckle on him, then it'll carry to your voice. Number two, tzvika, because if I'll sell it, I might rent it or loan it. Today you have rent-a-cars. A car is your keli. But if you have a behema and you rent your animals out, then you cannot never rent it on Shabbos. I don't care if the guy is the one that's the renter. Machna shois, am mitzuva an shvisas behemtoi. Okay, right. Says the Gemara. The Gemara is referring to the second question, the second minig, and follow your local minig, and that is regarding roasting meat in the night of the Seder. The Mishnah only spoke about a minig, whether you can eat it or not. But no way can a person ever articulate the words, this meat is for Pesach, which is always what we do for Yom Tov, right? This is for Pesach. This is for the Seder. You're not allowed to say that on meat. This is, by the way, nothing to do with roasted or not. Don't say the words, this meat is for Pesach. Why? even though when you're Magdash a Behema, you're only Magdash a Behema when the Behema is still alive. This animal is for my korban. It doesn't matter. And now you're saying this when the animal was slaughtered. Now you have a piece. This meat is for. Don't say those words. Amarav Papa. I want you to know that the Rab's Isur is only by meat, because it sounds similar to someone who's being Magdash an animal. Avol Chite. But if you have wheat, what did we learn above about Shmira? About Shmura Matzah. Shmura is not only from the time that you mix the flour and the water. Shmira means that from when you made the tzira, we don't want water to touch those grains. So if a person said these grains is lepesach, it doesn't sound like you're being magdash it. Fakert, it sounds like the minta lepesach amar. It sounds like you're being careful to guard it, that it shouldn't get wet. That's okay. That's okay to say that, but not on meat. Fragte Gemara, what a basar loy? No, can't be meisvei. Amar Rabbi Yosi. As we'll see in Amud Beis, there's a machlokes. There were two versions. Who authored this Braisa? Or the Braisa is quoting whom? Here we have Rabbi Yosi. We're going to see on Amud Beis Rab Shimon. But let's begin. Rabbi Yosi says, you should know that Toides Ishroimi, today is the Toides. Toides Ishroimi, Rashi writes, Toides was a very chashuv a person. And Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, there's going to be a question whether he was very chashuv or whether he was a muscle man that people were intimidated from him. We'll see that on Amud Beis. But Toides Ishraimi, Hinig as B'nei Raimi, he brought in a minig that what should the people do in Rome, those Italians, the Italian Yidden, Lechoel Gediyim Mikulasim, Oigavalt B'leil Psachim. In the Beis HaMikdash, get used to this when the Koren Pesach is going to be brought, it says in the Pasuk that you roast it all together. The Torah says, Roishoi al Kira'av al Kirboy, which means that even though that they would remove some of the innards of the animal, when they roasted that and the legs on the side of the whole gedi, whether it's a kid, right, whether it's a lamb, they are both good for a korban pesach. You know what it looks like when you have an animal that is almost complete. It was whole, and you have the spit going through it, and the parts that you cut off, you put on its side. It looks like a soldier with a weapon. That's called Gediyim Mikulasam, an armed Gedi, an armed kid. So Toida says Zecher LeMigdash, not don't do something that looks similar. Fakir, for us to remember how the Korban Pesach was prepared as the mitzvah for Korban Pesach over there in Rome. I know it's not kosher. Prepare the meat that you will eat, and it should look exactly the way the Korban Pesach looks. Gediyim Mikulasam. That means you take the animal. Ido Khan is dreaming about that, to take a gedi and to have the whole thing roasted, and even the feet and even the innards put on the side and roasted together. So Shalcholoi, so they said that if Mordechay Toides Ataf, not for you being Toides, and Toides Rashi writes here Adam Chashuv, then that's not good. Then if not, Goizarnu Alecha, we would have made a decree Nidui, we would have put you on a ban. And that's similar to what Rav said, because you're telling people to do something that looks so similar to the Korban Pesach. Sha'ata Michael as Yisrael kachem achutz. Now the words are very extreme. Sha'ata Michael kachem achutz. The Gemara clarifies kachem salkadaita. No one, he never said to designate this animal, God forbid, as a kachem. Ella ema daf nun gimel amud beis korayv lahachil as Yisrael kachem achutz, because it looks so similar. So because of the similarity, the Chachamim on that time were very they did not like the minig that he brought in, but still, because if he tried this, they didn't do something negative against him. Now, how is that connected to our sugya? So the Gemara says, you see that the issue that they had was mikulas. Mikulas again means armed, which means that you can't roast it in a way that it was mamish the way the Korban Pesach was roasted. In means yes, yes means no here. The problem is mikulas. That is where they were upset at Toides. But she'ein mikulas, but as long as you don't prepare it in a way that it looks similar to the Korban Pesach, even if you roast it, but you don't roast the whole animal when the animal is whole, you don't cut it into pieces, and even the parts that you have to take out, you leave on its side, then they have no issue. So the Agmar says, no. Amri, they explain that if you are roasting it mikulas, which it looks mamish the way the Koren Pesach was roasted, then loishna amar, we don't even care whether the person said basar zela Pesach. That is already unfavored. That's not viewed favorably. That's not good. She'ena mekulas, but if the animal, even if you're roasting it, you're not roasting it the way they roasted a Koren Pesach. Nevertheless, Pedish, Rav says, if you say basar zela pesach, that's where Rav said there's a problem. In means yes, it's no. Yes, no. Yes, it's a problem. Don't do that. Loi pedish, loi. Gewalt. Says the Gemara, I want you to know that when you quoted Rabbi Yossi quoting Toydis, Rav Acha also had that braisa, but he did not begin the braisa as we had. That Amar Rabbi Yossi, he had the braisa beginning in the name of Rab Shimon. Amar Rab Shimon. Says the Gemara, no, Rav Acha, you have it wrong. Maskiv lo Rab Sheshes to Rav Acha, bish lemilaman the Tani lo ki Rabbi Yossi, which is our version. Nicha, it's good. As we'll explain in a moment, where we try to understand why was Toydis close to bringing Jews to do something that looks like the eating kosher malchus, which is why they were upset at him. But if the author of this brayso, if the one that quoted all of this was Rabbi Shimon, then that's not going to work. Why won't it work? So let's start. This is a very important shas sugya, and this is the sugya of tfois lashon rishon, or af bigmar devarav adam nispas. So the case that we are bringing here from Menachos is where a person has flour from sa'odim, from barley, and he says harei olai mincha, or if he doesn't have it in front of him, he's making a neder. He's saying that I'm taking upon myself to bring a mincha from sa'odim. Truth be told, in the Beis Hamikdash, almost all of the korban menachos came dafka from chitim. I know there are two exceptions. Number one is the communal korban of the oimer. The oimer comes from sa'odim. That's the only korban sa'odim communal, and the only individual that would have to bring a korban of sa'odim, we know, is the soita. And by the way, she's obligated to bring it. It's never a nedava. There is no nedava of a mincha that comes from barley grains. So what do we do when a person says harei olai mincha min ha'sa'odim? So over there, the Tanakh says that that's called tfois lashon rishon. Listen to the words. Harei olai mincha min ha'sa'odim. The min ha'sa'odim doesn't work. But we don't look at the statement as a unilateral statement, and since it doesn't work, we reject it. No. Harei olai mincha stands. That person is mechuyev to bring a korban mincha as an adava, obviously from wheat. Comes along Rabbi Shimon, Vatanan Rabbi Shimon says, Poiter, no. Poiter means that since Shaloi Hisnadv Kederach HaMisnadvim, really there are two steps that are needed to explain Rab Shimon. Step number one is Rab Shimon subscribes to the concept that af bigmar devarav adam nispas. We're not tfois lashon rishon. A person cannot say two things in one moment. So they have to say one statement, and they have to then articulate the other statement. But we have to view at everything that they said a uniform statement. If the person said harei olai mincha min ha'sa'odim, and if there is no mincha min ha'sa'odim, and it's one statement, so we say that since you did not give an adava the way you should, so then we completely make your statement ineffective. Your statement is garnished. And therefore what? So over here, like Rashi explains, that if a person is not doing kidderech hamisnadvim, it's garnished. It's garnished. So why would they be upset on Toydis? That he feared in a minig over there in Rome, that people should have on the night of the Seder in Rome, in Italy, that they should have an animal that looks similar to, it's not exactly the same. You know why it's not exactly the same? In the Beis Hamikdash, I know that when it came to the roasting it, they roasted it like a armed kid. But before everything, they designated the animal as a korban. They said that this animal is for the Pesach. They were magdash it. Toydis never, God forbid, Toydis never said to be magdash the animal. So it's not the same. If it's not kederech hamisnadvim, according to Rab Shimon, it's b'chlal not a problem. Had Rab Shimon authored this brayso, he wouldn't have quoted the opposition of against Toydis. He would have agreed with Toydis. It's not exactly the same. It's ois. Now it fits if it's Rabbi Yossi, because we don't have that. Rabbi Yossi holds this concept that if it's not kederech hamisnadvim, we make it completely ineffective. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Okay, so I get it. You don't like the version that this was said by Rab Shimon. But who did you quote? What did we learn in Amud Aleph? What, minicha? Is that going to be okay? It's also not okay. Why is it not okay? That you should know that Rab Shimon, that we just quoted, We quoted Shelo Yisnadev Kederech HaMisnadvim, but that was step number 2, as we explained. Step number 1 is that Rab Shimon must reject twice lashon nishan, because if you say twice lashon nishan, harei olai mincha, that's a neder, that's a bona fide neder. It happens to be that the question whether twice lashon nishan or whether af bigmar devad of aron nispas, that is a machlokes in which Rabbi Yossi holds af bigmar devad of adam nispas. In other words, Rab Shimon and Rabbi Yossi happen to be l'choira on the same page. So if it's a kasha and Rab Shimon, it's a kasha and Rab Yossi. Let's read it back inside. What are you telling me that what? If it's Rab Yossi minicha v'ha'amar Rava, that Rab Shimon that we just quoted follows the shita of Rabbi Yossi Amara. Rabbi Yossi is the one that says af bigmar devar of adam nispas. Now the machlokes that we have regarding twice lashon nishan, the ground zero machlokes is a Masechtas Tamura, and the machlokes is between Rabbi Meir that says twice lashon nishan, and Rabbi Yossi and other Tanoim say af bigmar devarim nispas. What's the case in Tamura? It's good to remember this. A person has in front of him 3 animals. One is an oila, already an oila. One is already a shlamim. And then this person has their new animal that's chulin, and they want to be magdish their chulin. And you know what they say? They want to make a Tamura. Now, I know that we're not allowed to make an exchange, but if you make an exchange, it's effective, super effective. So if I have my animal and I say that harei zu tmuras oila, tmuras shlamim, here's the verter. I have 3 animals in front of me. One is an oila, one is a shlamim, and my chulin animal. And I'm saying on my chulin animal, harei zu tmuras oila, Tumura shlamim, not the Tumura shlamim. Tumura shlamim. Now, if this animal is a Tumuras oila, it's already an oila. It cannot be a shlamim. You know what Rav Meir says? Tfois lashon nishan. In other words, his statement had 2 parts. Can be both, so take the first. Comes along Rabbi Yossi and he says, no, he didn't make 2 statements. A person cannot say 2 words at one time. Only the Eibishter can do it. That's Rabbi Yossi. Af bigmar devar of adam nispas. He made one uniform statement. Is it possible for an animal to be Tumura Oila, Tumura Shlamim? Yeah. How is it possible over there? Say that the animal is not going to be imbued with Kedushas Aguf. It's only going to have Kedushas Damim. That animal should be sold. Or if it has Kedushas Aguf, wait until it gets a defect and then sell the animal. And the money should be used 50% for an oil and 50% for a Shlamim. That's Rabbi Yossi. Oh. So my love back in the Gemara, that Rab Shimon Savalak Rabbi Yossi, right, Rab Shimon in the Mishnah, Harei Olai Mincha Men Hasiyodim, is garnished. He holds like Rabbi Yossi, so L'chayre Rabbi Yossi also holds like Rab Shimon. And if that would be the case, then the same challenge we have in understanding, how can Rab Shimon be the one quoting the Braisa? Why would anyone go against Toides? Who cares if it partially looks similar to the Koren Pesach? It's not completely like the Koren Pesach because you were not magdish the animal before you shlechted it, and therefore it should be a non-problematic. L'chayre Rabbi Yossi will also to subscribe to this concept of shaloi snad k'derech hamisnadvim. So the Gemara says, no, that's not true. That Rab Shimon holds like Rabbi Yossi. In order for you to explain that when a person says harei olai mincha min ha'so'odim, for you to be exempt, you need to have 2 steps. Step number 1 is not twice lashon nishan. If it's twice lashon nishan, then you have to bring a carbon min achitim. First, you have to hold af bigmar dvarav. Number 2, Rab Shimon adds to that the concept of shaloi snadev k'derech hamisnadvim. But however, Rabbi Yossi like Rab Shimon, Rabbi Yossi holds that af bigmar dvarav adam nispas, but Rabbi Yossi doesn't subscribe that shaloi snadach k'derech hamisnadvim. So it works that the Braisa was authored by Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds that if something looks similar to a carbon, you got yourself a problem, and therefore they were against the minhag of Toides. Now let's understand, but they didn't make a ban against him. He did something not good, but they let him be. So Iboyelahu, let's understand. Toides, Ishroimi, was he taka gavra rabba hava? Was he a great Jew? And out of respect for his greatness and for the many other qualities, even though here he made a mistake, they did not ban him. Or Bali Geroifen hava? Or was he a powerful man, a mafia man, a violent man, to whom they were afraid to put him to a nidui? Which one is it? So Tashema, let's go throughout Shas. Let's find where else is this Toides Ishraimi quoted, and let's see what he was doing. And from the following Braisa, we're going to see that Toides was a great man, was a Gavra Rabba. Tashema, oidzu darash Toides Ishraimi. once Titus was explaining, Ma ro Chananya Mishol Vazaria Shemasru Atzman Al Kedusas Hashem. What was their Kiddush Hashem? That they were willing to allow themselves to be thrown into the into the fiery furnace. What are we referring to? That when Nebuchadnezzar built a Mount Rushmore, the first a statue Nebuchadnezzar, and everyone was supposed to bow down to it. And they were the first ones that said no. And they understood that their life would be taken from them, as indeed they were thrown into the Kivshon Ha'esh. Now, that Hashem made a nest was not something that they counted on. Why did they do that? What do you mean, why did they do that? All the Rishonim ask, what kind of kasha is that? We are mitzvah on Kiddush Hashem. So there's a whole discussion as to why me'ikir adin, they were not mechoyev to do it, but they still did it. And let's go with Shitas Tosfos. This is a very famous Tosfos. The second Tosfos in the Amid. Periscope content is that they should have said v'chai b'hem even on avodah zarah v'lo shiyamus b'hem. That's Rashi. And we learned in Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Dalid that the Lekula Alma, that when it comes to avodah zarah bifaresia, you're chayiv limser atzmai. And by the way, and not only avodah zarah, if it's bifaresia, even on a mitzvah kala. So umefarash Rabbeinu Tam, and we quote this, that the tzelem zeh she'asa Nebuchadnezzar, that the image, the statue that Nebuchadnezzar made, or he had made his own statue, lav avodah zarahu. It wasn't as a deity. Ella, it's tarta, which means Mount Rushmore. She'asa l'kavod atzmai, made a big Nebuchadnezzar statue for his own kavod. And that, since it was not made l'avodah zarah, says Rabbeinu Tam, there's nothing me'ikir adin wrong with bowing down. Eloma, they wanted to go beyond the letter of the law. It should not be misconstrued. And that was something that they were not mechoyev to do. So coming back to Toides, so why did they do that? So back inside the Braisa, and the answer that he gave was that Nasu kal v'chomer ba'atzman mitzfardim. He made a kal v'chomer from the tzfardim, from the second mark. What's the kal v'chomer? The Ramah tzfardim. They're not commanded. They're not bar mitzvahs. Nevertheless, that this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Pari, which indeed happened, that they're going to enter your homes and inside your ovens and in your kneading bowls. And not only did they enter the ovens, but the Torah juxtaposes the ovens and the kneading bowls. Why did the Torah specify kneading bowls? The only keli, I get it, in the tanur, because they entered the ovens. But even the kneading bowls, it must be a masai. Misharis mitzuim eitzel tanur, that kneading bowls, they used to knead the dough. When do you find them out of the cabinets? L'chayda, normally, when you're talking making bread, when the oven is on. In other words, what he wanted to point out is that they entered the ovens, the mesiras nefesh, and they entered even the kneading bowls when they were near the oven. And if a tzfadeya were to enter, he would get burnt. And they did it anyways. So they gave up their lives, even though they're not commanded. Said Toides is Anu, said Toides what? Mishol Hanan and Azariah said, Anu shemetzuv v'nachlushas Hashem, alachas kama v'kama. And from this type of limud, they figured out he's not a Bale Groifen. This is an Adam Gadol, and therefore when he made a minig that they did not like, they did not put him into a chedem. They said, we don't like this minig, but a nidoi they did not put him into. More about Toides, that he's a Gavra Rabba. How do you know that he's a Gavra Rabba? Not only because he understands the importance of going beyond the letter of the law when it comes to Kiddush Hashem, but his greatness is that he used to help Talmidei Chachamim make a parnasa. He would get merchandise and he would put it into their pockets. It doesn't mean that he gifted it to them. His life was to make sure that Talmidei Chachamim should have parnasa. That's the Adam Gadol. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Kol hamatel meloy lekis Talmidei Chachamim, that whoever makes sure that Talmidei Chachamim should be able to earn a living, he'll help them have parnasa. Zoiche v'yoshev v'yeshiva shel ma'ila. Shenemar, as it says in Koheles, that ki b'tzeil ha'chachma, in the shadow of chachma, b'tzeil kesef. Now, how does that make sense? The word is that if you want to sit in the tzeil of the Eibush, this chachma, you make sure that when you're living over here, you make sure that people around you have kesef. Make sure that be concerned about the other yid's parnasa. The other Yid's Gashmias is your Ruchnias. That's the Gemara over here. And that was Toidus. Toidus was a man who always made sure that the people around him and the Talmud and the God-fearing people should have a livelihood. Let's go by to the next Mishnah. Again, Minhagim. Says the Mishnah, Makim Shanahagu Lahadlik Esaner B'Leila Yom Kippurim Adlikin. One of the 7 mitzvahs that are banon, right? Na B'Simcha is Shabbos. Shabbos means Hadlakas Neder Shabbos. So everyone lights candles before Shabbos. Do you light candles before Yom Kippur? We're not speaking about Yom Tov. We're speaking dafka about Yom Kippur. That depended on the minig, madlikin. But makim shenahagu shaloi lahadlik ein madlikin. And as the Gemara will explain, that both customs was to prevent cohabitation between a husband and a wife. And I will speak out soon why each minig felt that having light in the house will prevent. We know that it's usher to be meshama shamita b'fnei haner. So have lights. So there won't be tashma shamita, or the opposite, that if a man will see his wife, he'll find her desirable, he might want to have a relation with her. So whichever one it is, follow your local minik. And going back to the first Mishnah we learned in this Pedic, and if you come from one place and you're now in another place, then again, however we put together the Bai and the Rava, whether we should first make sure not to do a machlokes, and if we can do that together with being machmed and always being machmed, do that. But this is a minig, and follow your minig. Next, then in the Mishnah, that this question of whether you should light candles going into Yom Kippur, that's only in the home. But umadlikin, everyone has a minig, because these are areas in which there's no tashma shamita. Umadlikin bebatik nesiyos, ubebatim midrashos, and ubimefois hoafelim in dark alleys, that it's safer for it to be lit up. Valgaba hachoilim, b'chlal we learned that a choili, part of a choili is he has to be in good spirits, and darkness. If you lie in a dark place, that in itself makes the person depressed, and that's a sakana we learned to some Masechta Shabbos. So in those areas, for sure, light candles even entering Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara Tana we learned in the Braisa that bein she'amru lahadlik, whether the minig, those who said that the dafka light lahadlik ner of Yom Kippurim, bein she'amru shalei lahadlik. You should know, Shneim Ludavar Echad Niskapnu, they both had the same intent as we explained. They both wanted to prevent cohabitation. And Amr Rabbi Yeshua Dar Shrava, when we learned the Pasik, Va'amich Kulam Sadikim, that all of the Yidden are Sadikim, Lo'olam Yeshuaretz, that Pasik went to this Machlokes in Minig, Bein She'amru Lahadlik, Bein She'amru Shaloi Lahadlik. It always came from the Yidden being tzaddikim. In other words, they were both of these manhagim came from, they were motivated by righteous desire. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Here we start. So as the Mishnah spoke about whether we light candles going into Yom Kippur, now let me ask you another question. At the end of Yom Kippur, when we make Havdalah, do we also make a bracha on fire? So when it comes to Shabbos, after Shabbos, we make a bracha. We learned this in brachas, boirei me'oirei ha'esh. And as we explained to Masechta brachas, that boirei me'oirei ha'esh is not a birchas hanahenen. Like, why do you make a bracha every time? Why do you make a bracha every time you get benefit from fire? So we explained over there that birchas hanahenen is something, if your body mamish, it has pleasure from it, it becomes internalized in your body, which is food, and even reyach, even though it doesn't last. But I give you an example. If a person goes outside and he's hot or she's hot and there's a nice cool breeze that blows, you don't make a birchas hanahenen. It's not tangible. It doesn't go into your body. So the hana that you get from fire is hana, but it doesn't justify a birchas hanahenen. Is a bircha shevach v'hoida. When it comes to blessing, praising God for something that He gave to mankind, which is to our benefit, how often do you make it? That's something that you make every now and then. So how often do you make it? Matzah Shabbos. So let's begin. So Amr Rabbi Shmuel ein mevarchen al ha'od ela b'matzah Shabbos, and not in any other time, which would also exclude not Matzah Yom Kippur. We make a boirei me'oirei ha'esh. We'll get to that, God willing, on Daf Nun Daled. But let's begin with this question. So he quotes, Rabbi Yehuda quotes Shmuel, only Matzah Shabbos. And why did Chazal choose that time to be the time to praise Hashem? Because the first time that fire was created was Matzah Shabbos. All this is in Daf Nun Daled. That Adam Arishain, after the Chet, even though the consequences only came into the world after the Chet. It didn't come into the world right away. Friday night, Adam Rishon still had access to the light that we had during the 7 days of creation, and that he did not need the fire. It was lichtik even at night, whatever that means. The first time he experienced real darkness, when was he expelled from Gan Eden? Or as we learn in Basalagani, when did the Shekhinah depart from this world? Matzah Shabbos. So then the world became dark. And then God put das in Adam, and he picked up 2 stones, and he hit them one against the other, and from there came out fire. So since Bria really is 7 days of creation, even though the Lashon is Tchilas B'riyasei, the potential for fire was created during the 7 days of creation. But the first time bepoiled that there was fire in the world was Matzah Shabbos. So therefore, it makes sense that if you want to praise Hashem for the fact that he gave in the Teva the fire, which is to our benefit when we use it properly, do that once a week and not Matzah Yom Kippur. Now, Elyahu Sava. V'itema Rabba Bar Chana, when he heard that, he said, Yishar, good gezat, only Matzah Shabbos. And then he added, Rabbi Yechanan also was the one that said that Boidem Ha'esh is only made on Matzah Shabbos, meaning not Matzah Yom Kippur. Ooh, 1 second, so don't run. So now the Gemara says a story that Ula was once riding on a donkey, and he was going with 2 great people. Shakal v'Azal, who was going with him. On his right went Rabbi Abba, and on his left went Rabbi Bar Chana Mismali. So Amalei Rabbi Abba Ula. So Rabbi Abba, the one on the right, told the teacher Ula, Vadai da Amritu, is it true that you, Ula, said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, like Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that what? That Eim Avarchem Al Oir Elam Tzei Shabbos Hoyel Tchilas B'Yasehu? And Ula was not happy with that. Ula never said that. Actually, Ula held that Rabbi Yechanan holds that you also make a Boidem Ha'esh on Matzah Yom Kippur. Now, why did Rav Abba think that Ula said it? Ula chapped, because he heard that from the other Talmud, from an Abba Bar Chana. So, Hadar Ula Chazi Beiber Abba Bar Chana Bishus. Ula stared angrily at Rabbi Bar Chana, because who quoted Ula saying something that Ula did not say? So Rabbi's defending himself. Rabbi says, no. I did not quote Rabbi Yechanan the way Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel quoted. There was a misunderstanding. Let me tell you when I quoted Rabbi Yechanan. The Tani we learned. The Tanach made Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Shimon Elazar Omer, that Yom HaKippurim Shechal Liyas B'Shabbos. What happens if Yom Kippur is on Shabbos? So we learned in our Mishnah a question of minig. Do you light? We're not speaking about Matzah Yom Kippur. Our minig is speaking about candles for Yom Kippur. Our Mishnah says it's Talmud minig. So the question now is, what happens if Yom Kippur is on Shabbos? So Rabbi Yechanan, in front of Rabbi Yechanan, they quoted the Braisa that quotes Rabbi Shimon Elazar that says that when Yom Kippur falls on Shabbos, why shaloi lahadlik? Like we mentioned, going into Yom Kippur because to prevent that people should not have a tashmish, madlikim epnei kavod Shabbos. Since it's Yom Kippur and Shabbos, for Shabbos trumps, you got to light the candles. And va'ani Rabbi Yechanan basrei, Rabbi Yechanan heard it, and he said, no, v'chachamim oisvin. No, the chachamim disagree with that. But when do you light it? Look inside the Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom of Moededik. V'chachamim oisvin lahadlik haner af b'yom ha'kippurim shchaliyas b'Shabbos. Forget what Rabbi Yechanan says that the chachamim aser. Rabbi Yechanan added ad motzoi Shabbos. Faket, Rabbi Yechanan was hinting, punkt faket, that Matzah Yom Kippur, which is Matzah Shabbos, there you do light the fire for the Boidem Ha'esh. Now, v'lo yizkarti shmei shel Rabbi Yechanan al orba motzoi Shabbos. Elo bezu. I quoted Rabbi Yechanan only in this case. I quoted Rabbi Yechanan regarding lighting candles going into Shabbos Yom Kippur. They misunderstood me. Oh, so the last line of the Amid, so Amalei, so Ula tells, correct. Not the way he thought that Rabbi Yechanan was quoted in my name, that Rabbi Yechanan agrees to Shmuel. He dafka doesn't. And indeed, Kari, Alei, Rabbi Yosef, this pasuk, no, it's Ula, read, Rabbi Yosef read regarding Ula and regarding Rabba, Mayim Amukim is Eitzabel, Mayim Amukim Eitzabel Evish, that counsel to the heart of man is like deep water. And Dafnun Dalet V'ish Tavuna Yidlena. So even if the waters are very deep and not everyone can get access to the waters, but an Ish Tavuna, but a man of Bina will be able to draw it out. Mayim Amukim Eitzabel Evish, that goes to Ula. Who properly understood him, not the one going, not Rab Abba, right, who was going to his right, but who understood Ula correctly, who quoted the Rabbi Yochanan in the right context, not in the wrong context, but the Ish Tevuna Yitlana that goes on Rabba Bar Chana. However, the Inu Kamanso, but the other ones held that what? That there is a machlekes, what Rabbi Yochanan says. That what? That Nevarchim al Ha'ur Bein Motzoi Shabbos. In other words, they Ula Naba hold that Rabbi Yochanan holds that you do make a bracha on fire. Bein Motzoi Shabbos, Bein Motzoi Yom Kippurim. And not only that, concludes the Gemara, V'chein Amod Debar. Go look what the Oilam does. Was tut the Welt? That we do make a Boidem Oiro Ha'esh, also Motzoi Yom Kippur. So this version of Rabbi Yochanan clearly goes against the shita that we began our sugya of Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that ein bevarchem al ol el b'matzoi Shabbos. So now we're going to leave up with this machlekes, whether you b'ayim e'oiro eish matzoi Shabbos, you for sure make. And we're going to learn a lot of Agadat in the next daf as to why we do that. Question is, do you also light fire matzoi Yom Kippur? Don't forget that the reason of Tchilas b'riyosoi is matzoi Shabbos. Yom Kippur is not necessarily on Shabbos. And we'll find out, as we already spoke out, that even those who say that you do light, you make the boirim ha'oyer ha'esh on fire, Motzoi Shabbos, Motzoi Yom Kippur, it's dafka not if you create that fire, Motzoi Yom Kippur. No, it has to be on the Ner Shashavas. We'll explain that, God willing, in the next year to be continued.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Going back to the behemoth selling.
Yes.
So the whole reason is because we don't want to be Machal Shabbos. That's the whole reason we're not allowed to sell a behemoth to a Nachri.
In other words, if I were to rent it, I'm Machal Shabbos. If I were to lend it, I'm Machal Shabbos. So the Chacham,
meaning if I sell it to the Nachri, let the Nachri do whatever he wants with it.
Correct. No, correct. When you sell the animal, it's no longer yours. But since when it comes to other areas than halacha, let's say we began the Masechta Pesachim, if I rent an apartment, who's obligated to do b'dikas chametz? We learned the renter. The renter is the owner. So many people would have gotten confused. They would think that if I rent my animal to the goy for a week, so during that week it belongs to the goy. But that's not the truth. When it comes to shvisas behemtoi, even if the goy paid for it as a renter, I'm going to be violating my animal as working.
What about mechira?
Mechira is something midoraisa tzmuter. The Chachamim says to prevent me from renting, to prevent me from lending, don't even sell. I should remember that with goyim, there's no transactions with behema gasas. And the question is, did that even go to behema daka? That's totally b'minik. That was the mission of the behema daka.
What's the distinction? What's
the
difference?
The behema gasas were primarily used to plow fields or to schlep schoira, which are two malachas doiraisa, charisha and the hoitzah, and behema dakas primarily were not used to do any malacha.
So does it apply today? I'm not allowed to rent something to a guy, a tractor, if he's going to use it on Shabbos?
No. I spoke about tzvika. So there's a difference between animals and kalim. So we paskin that we are commanded to have my animals rest, but not our kalim, including my cars. I rent a car, but then there's schar Shabbos. In other words, if you, here in Universal, they're very good at it. If someone were to rent a car from you only for Shabbos, that's a schar Shabbos issue. Going back to schar Shabbos. And the solution is, don't rent it for 25 hours, rent it for 26 hours, rent it for 2 days.
So in Israel, they give you these Haredi rent-a-cars, they give you Shabbos for free. They don't charge you for Shabbos. But
then they charge you triple for Sunday. Right. The Haredi rent-a-cars.
And what about apartments? The same?
No. I forgot why, Tzamach. I forgot why. This is
I knew I'd stump you. It's a matter of time.
I got it. I have to find out by real estate. Okay.